There's Alain Trudel performing the Concerto for Trombone by Nino Rota. And Alain Trudel is in town to conduct, I was going to say perform, but he's done that before, conduct with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra tomorrow night. Alain Trudel has been praised by La Presse for his immense talent as a conductor, musician, and performer. As a conductor, he's right now music director of the Orchestra Symphonique de Laval and principal youth and family conductor of the National Arts Centre Orchestra. He's busy. He's also principal guest conductor of the Ottawa Symphony Orchestra and principal guest conductor of the Victoria Symphony Orchestra. He was a guest musical advisor for the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra for one season, and he's in town, as I mentioned, to conduct the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra tomorrow night, and he just made it into the studio. Good morning, Alain.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for coming in. I was saying this is early. Most artists, musicians, conductors are like, they groan even to come in for 8:30. So that you made it in for 7:30 is quite a feat. So thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Now, I mentioned in the introduction there that you spent some time with the Manitoba Chamber. So this is definitely not your first time. We know that. You actually spent a whole season as an advisor for the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra. How did that come about that you were...
it was a funny adventure. They had a music director who quit, and they were in between during their search for a new music director, and I had been here a few times, and they asked me if I'd help out and be a music advisor, help on programming, and conduct for about a season and a half, about 2 seasons, until they found somebody. Conducted most of the concerts. That was in 2007 and part of 2008. So it was a real pleasure. They're a fantastic group of musicians.
And it's been, I think you were mentioning, it's been about 7 years or so since you've been back.
Yes.
Wow, it's gone by fast.
I know, and I'm so happy to see everybody again. Time goes by and we get so busy, and it's difficult with schedules sometimes. So, but finally we could make it. I could make it, and I'm really, really happy about it.
Well, we're happy to have you back. And
thank you.
You mentioned that you're so busy, and one of the reasons, not one of the reasons, but a main reason you're so busy is because you conduct. You're a conductor with many different orchestras. You also play trombone, so you wear 2 different hats as well. So you've got people pulling you in 2 different directions, right?
Yes, there's been some of that. Of late, there's been more playing, actually, and it's kind of my first love, right? I was very happy. I had stopped playing some years ago, actually a year before I came here, because I was very sick and I had to have some kind of operation, and it meant I had to stop playing for a few years, actually. So I never thought I'd get back to playing to an international level, but about a year and a half, about 2 years ago, I just missed it too much. So I'm really going to try to make the most out of it. As a brass player, you're born with a preemption date or stick on you best before a certain day. So I said, it's kind of silly that I don't play a little bit more. And also as a conductor, I always feel I relate more to my colleagues, and I'm actually, I think, more efficient or just a better musician, better conductor when I play. Not necessarily in that particular concert, but if you actually have to be on stage and once in a while have to make a sound yourself, because a conductor, as much as you can guide and have ideas and be some kind of try to have show the direction, that's what they call a director, right?
Yeah.
Show the direction of something. It's like in a movie, right? You have a director, but he's never on screen. You see the actors, which are the players, but it's like a coach, you plan things, you give the ideas, you show the direction, but you're not actually playing. So it's good to be playing once in a while.
So you can relate to them in a different way, in a sense, from both perspectives.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I work with my colleagues as exactly that, colleagues. So we are colleagues, and everybody has their job. Like, for example, this week we play, one of the pieces we play is very, very demanding. It's the 3 pieces from La Lyrique Suite by Alban Berg, and you need to have somebody who really has in their mind has made a synthesis of the whole thing, how it goes together. It's like I have put the piece of the puzzle, and then together we put those pieces together, and we come up with the right interpretation for it. So that's interesting. But what I really like about the concert we're doing this week is that it's featuring a lot of the musicians from the orchestra.
That's true. We'll chat. We're going to talk about them in a second. I'm in the studio with Alain Trudel, who is in town in Winnipeg to conduct the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra and their concert tomorrow night. Just before we talk about the concert, we'll definitely talk about the concert. You mentioned that the trombone is your first love. When did you fall in love with the trombone?
Oh, it's interesting because it was kind of an arranged marriage at the beginning.
By your parents? Was it the parents of?
No, well, it's funny. Both my parents were jazz musicians, so to play trombone, yeah, but it has nothing to do with them. I went into we may call it like a brass band, some kind of brass band. It was kind of an eclectic brass band because we played disco music and all kinds of top 40 and pop chart, and it was in my neighborhood in the Plateau Mont-Royal in Montreal. And there were volunteers who worked there. We had a policeman. We had somebody who had a trophy engraving shop. We have somebody who had a ice cream parlor. Mm-hmm. But they're all big music fans, and they put together this group for teenagers so that they would not hang out on the streets, and they would actually do something else with their life. So in occurrence of playing music. So I just went there, and I said, well, I'd like to play the drums like my father. And they said, well, we're out of that. Everybody picked those. Well, I'd like to play the trumpet because all my friends want to play the trumpet, so they're all picked. What about you play the valve trombone? And I said, whatever. So it started like that. So it was a little bit bizarre, and I wasn't that good that first year. But, usually nobody is at the beginning. You try and something happens. I think it's kind of a circle, right? You practice a bit more, you become a little bit better. As you become better, then it's not so hurtful for your ears to practice. Yes. And you play a little bit more, and then keeping practicing and getting better and better. And finally, I really enjoyed it. And really, what made the difference is when I switched to the valve trombone, which is like a big trumpet, really, with valves, with pistons, to the slide trombone. And that made a beautiful sound. I said, wow, it's rich, it's dark, and I kind of like the tone very much. And then I just ran with it. I mean, I just went to the Conservatoire, mostly because the Conservatoire, it was free to study there. Especially when I was young. Now it's not free, but it's not very expensive still. But that was the way, because we were very poor. So it was the only way I could really have a musical education, is to succeed in getting in with the audition, because you'd only get in if you win the audition. And I was second runner-up, and the two guys before me didn't go. Whoa! So it was meant to be, I guess. So I went. And then from then on, from the age of 15, I went into this high school in Montreal also, called Joseph-François Perrault. And I met my mentor. You always meet, the person that's so important to you in school usually. And it's usually somebody an unsung hero, from high school or something like that. So my band/orchestra conductor, because we had an orchestra in that school, he was my mentor. I mean, for all the rest of his life.
What was his name?
Raymond Grignet. And there was another man also called Gérald Macley, who is still alive. The other one, unfortunately, has passed away. But they passed on to me love of music and love of doing something well done, and to come in, you talk about coming in at 7:30. All our band rehearsals were at 6:30 or 7 in the morning.
So this is late for you.
We had the private practicing time at noon between our lessons, our courses, and we had orchestra after school. So it was a regiment of very strict, but it made for a lot of musicians from that school, and it's abnormal. So many musicians from that school that actually have a professional career now, playing in anywhere from the Montreal Symphony to orchestras in the Chicago Symphony in the States, to having a few conductors actually that came out of that school. He would let me conduct every week the orchestra. So I've had podium time since I'm 15.
I was going to ask you when you switched from playing to conducting and how that kind of...
Well, it's not really a switch because as a trombone player in the orchestra, you don't play so much. So I love playing, and I played in jazz groups and marching band, and there you play a lot. Then I sat in the orchestra, which has the most beautiful repertoire. But you don't play. You just come in. Well, no, it has a particular role, right?
Yeah.
And you come in the climax, and that's fantastic. So, but I always wanted to, my big big goal that I have was to be a composer, which, as you can see, is a failure.
Just hasn't happened yet. That's all.
No,
That's your next phase. Yeah.
I write some things. Actually, I wrote a lot of orchestration arrangement for the orchestra here when I was advisor, and actually they're doing one of my adaptation later on in the year. But all of this to say that what interests me is how the music was made, like from the inside, inside the orchestra. So I always had a score with me in all the orchestra rehearsal. And Raymond Grignan, my mentor, he was looking at me and said, what is he doing? He said, you're conducting, you see this kid in the trombone section is 15 years old, like eating up the scores, of everything we're doing. And he said, hey, you want to come up and do a little bit? I'm like, whoa, yeah, sure. When you're young, you don't know. Ignorance is bliss, right? So I was very, very blissful. And every week he let me do a little something, sometimes a longer time, sometimes very short. But for a conductor to have access to the instrument, which is the orchestra, when you're so young, makes it very natural for you to do any kind of transition to conducting later on, because it's not really a transition, because I've been doing it since I'm 15. It's just that at a certain point, and especially in the 80s when my trombone career starting to 90s, let's say, when it started to work a little bit more, to have more concerts and solo performances, and then you have to make a choice. Am I doing more one, more of the other? And about 7-8 years ago now, the choice was a little bit made for me, because I was sick and I couldn't play for a lot of time. So I concentrated more on conducting, which has been like 90% of what I do now. And it still is. But it's just I want to add a little bit more playing now too. But so conducting came all about because I want to know how the music was made, what's in it, what's all the ingredients of the recipes, and each composer, how they want to make their particular sound or construction of their pieces. So for me, that's really how the interest, the spark for the interest was.
Well, let's talk about this concert that we've got lined up for tomorrow night with Manitoba Chamber Orchestra. It's kind of it's a real interesting program when you look at it, because you've got people like Bach and Leopold Mozart, but then we have Alban Berg's Lyric Suite, again, a very challenging piece, and this new work by Sid Rabinovich, a concerto for percussion and strings, and it's featuring a lot of great local musicians. We've got Victoria Sparks, Carl Stobie, Carrie DeWars, Patricia Evans, Carolyn Abreu, all performing these works. So I wanted to ask you about the Sid Rabinovich piece. When you get when there's a new piece presented to you like that, how much time do you actually get with it?
It depends. Sometimes it's very short, because you just they finished the work a little bit late. But in Sid's case, it was perfect. I had it before Christmas. Okay. And sometimes it can go from a few days to a few months. So it's never really the same. The important thing is that, like I told you, for me, the interest of music comes from an interest of writing. So I love premiering new works, or getting in works that are a bit challenging, complicated, psychologically sometimes, to look at it and to see what the message is, and to try to bring that out from the music, as in the Berg Lyric Suite, for example. But in Sid's piece, what's great is that it's a great vehicle for percussion, and there's not so many concertis for percussion, and it's not only like marimba and vibraphone. It also has like snare drum in it. There's all kinds of percussion in it, but it's really a lot on the clavier instruments. So it's nice because you can hear a percussion instrument playing melodies, and it's not just effects and virtuosity, but there's a lot of it. That the last movement, we're seeing it this morning, first time with the soloist. So I'm going from here to our rehearsal a little bit later. For the musician, it's not so early. We still have a bit of time before we start, so that's good. But I'm always very excited when we have a new premiere on the program. And that's one thing that the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra does very, very well, is a mix between repertoire. For example, in this concert, where Carl and Carrie will be playing a Bach's double concerto, one of the most well-known concerto, Ré, mi, fa, sol, la, ré, do, la, mi, sol, fa, ré, do, si, la, si, so. That's high in the morning. Ré, mi, fa, sol, la, that would be better.
Better you sing it than me.
So that is perhaps one of the most well-known, top 20 tunes that you'll hear even on the radio. So, but mixed with the Berg Suite, which you really don't hear that often, and a new work, and a wonderful little piece by Leopold Mozart, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's father, that he wrote before Amadeus was born. So it's kind of a work that he wrote while he was in a heyday as a composer. Actually, Leopold Mozart was really well known as a pedagogue, as a teacher. I mean, he's one of the great reason why Mozart was so good on the violin. Also, he was one of the greatest violin teachers ever, and we still use some of his methods today. Violin method, not so well known as a composer. Actually, he wrote a trombone concerto that I recorded some years ago.
Yeah, we have that on our system.
You know what's interesting about that concerto? It's just a little. Unfortunately, it's not good for the violist. You know, people say they're a viola joke sometimes. That he wrote in his score, first page of the score, is that it's concerto for alto trombone, and then the occurrence that you don't have a trombone player present. A good violinist can play it on the viola. That's not very nice. But anyway, so that concerto for two horns, the particularity of it is that it's really in the high register a lot. It's very virtuosic for the two horns, and they're the two horns from the orchestra, and they're the horns from the Winnipeg Symphony also. And they're wonderful horn players, but my God, the music from that time was so much in the high register. So I admired the players that decided to pick that. But again, that's going to be some music that people will relate to. The language of the music they will relate to. Sid's piece, the language they will also relate to. There's what's interesting in that piece. There's a series of chords, minor chords. So they're really that's minor, right? So there's a series of minor chords that throughout the piece. That's interesting because composers usually they have a minor chord, a major chord, diminution. They mix it up. But he told me yesterday when I like to meet with the composer, of course, when we have the luxury of having a living composer that's going to be there at the concert, and we can talk to them and pick their brains about, how the piece came about. And he said, I had some minor chords at the beginning of this, particular movement. And I said, I'm just going to continue as long as I can with those. So it's a choice, and it's interesting for the listener to have that. And no, I'm very excited about it.
Alain Trudel is in town to conduct the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra, so we're looking forward to that. That's tomorrow night. You can go to themco.ca for information and tickets. And Alain, we could keep chatting. We could keep chatting because there's all about your career, your recording career, and all that kind of stuff. Your new recordings with Atma and your old ones with Naxos. There's so many different recordings, but we don't have a lot of time left this morning. But thank you for coming in. My pleasure. And again, welcome back to Winnipeg.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry to greet you with such cold, but it is Winnipeg. You've been here before. You're used to it. So have a wonderful show tomorrow night. And again, we will look to welcome you back again sooner than 7 years, I hope.
Oh, yes. Well, we hope to see you.